In this session, we are going to look into JSON and overview of the web services. In the earlier session, we looked into what is an XML and how the XML processing is done, how XMLs are created and how XMLs are processed with respect to the JavaScript coding as well as the PHP coding jQuery. So how we can consume the XML and how XML is useful for the communication between two different systems. Similar to XML, JSON is also, we can use it for connecting to a system. It's not only for the JavaScript, it can be used with any kind of a language, PHP or any other language. Basically, when you are sending a request, the response can be given either as a XML or it can be given as the JSON. JSON is much concise. If you see the format of the JSON, it is much concise compared to the XML. And JSON stands for the JavaScript object notation, and it is not only limited to the JavaScript. It will be used in PHP and other languages, and it can be used as a response, irrespective of what kind of a system we have. We can send a JSON object as a response. Either we can consume or we can respond as a JSON. Like XML, JSON is a data serialization format. It provides a more concise format than the XML. And many REST web services encode their return data in JSON data format instead of XML. So we'll see what is a REST web services. So REST web services, they return the data. Okay, whatever the return data, they return it as a JSON data instead of a XML data. This is an example of XML object in JSON. If you remember, we had taken the one sample XML, and in that XML we had information about the paintings, and one part of that information is the artist. This is part of the XML. So XML artist tag is there, closing artist tag. Inside the artist, we have the name of the artist and the nationality. Now, how it is represented using a JSON. So you will have inside the open curly brace and the closing curly brace. Artist is the object inside the double quotes, then colon, then we will have the a pair of open curly braces and the closing curly a pair of open and closing curly brace. Inside that, we will have the name value pair or the key value pair separated by comma. So you can see the first one is the name with double quotes, colon. This is the value. If it is a text, it will have double quote. If it is not a text, let's say if it is a number, then just you will have the number, comma. Inside the double quotes, nationality, colon, value is the France, so which is a text. If we convert that complete example, XML example into a JSON, okay, this is how it will look like. This is the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace. Inside, I have the paintings object inside the double quotes, colon. Then I have the square brackets, opening square bracket and the closing square bracket. And inside that, I have three sets of paintings. So this is the first set of the object, second set, and the third set of the painting information. And this particular object, which has opening curly brace and closing curly brace, these are separated by the comma. This is the first one, this is the second one, comma, and the third one. And these are indexed by 0, 1, and 2. And inside each of this object, we have the name and the value pair. Name is ID 290, comma, title, colon, balcony, comma. Then we have the artist. Artist here is mapped to another object. And inside that, we have the name and the value pair. name and the nationality. Then we have year and medium. So this is how the JSON will look like. If you compare it to the XML, this is much precise than compared to the XML. So using JSON in JavaScript, creating a JSON JavaScript object, it is very simple in case of a JavaScript. Whatever the JSON format, it goes in line with how the JavaScript objects are. So when we are using the JSON with the JavaScript, the kind of usage is very seamless, and it is in line with how the JavaScript uses. If you want to create a JavaScript, you'll say variable a is equal to open curly brace and closing curly brace, and this is artist inside the double quotes colon. Then you have the next pair of curly braces open and close. Inside that we have the name value pair, which is exactly same as the JSON format. And once you do this, this object will be created and it will be referenced in the variable a. And how you will access these values? You will call the object dot artist dot name. So it will get the information manet that is concatenated with the space plus again concatenated with the object dot artist dot, this is object dot artist dot nationality. So it is going to fetch this value. When the JSON information will be contained within a string, okay, the JSON dot parse function can be used to transform the string containing into JavaScript object. So we can use this JSON dot parse function. It will convert the JSON which is stored inside a string into an JavaScript object. We'll see the code for that. Here is the text. Okay. Variable text is equal to, we have the JSON, okay, format inside the single quotes, means basically it is nothing but a text. And then what we will do is we will call the JSON dot parse, and we pass the parameter as this particular text. This particular text will go as the parameter. JSON.parse will take this text. If this text is a valid JSON format, then it will convert it into JavaScript object, and that JavaScript object reference will be given to this variable a. Then how to access? Same. You will say the object a dot artist dot nationality. This will fetch the value of France in this particular example. This is the a dot nationality dot a dot artist dot nationality. It will fetch this particular value. And alert method, as you know, it will make a pop-up window and display the text as France. And what we did was we converted the text which is containing the JSON format information. We converted into an JavaScript object using JSON.parse. Similarly, we can convert a JavaScript object, JavaScript JSON object back into the text. And for that, we use the JSON.stringify. Java also provides a mechanism to translate JavaScript object into a string. How to do that? Variable text is equal to JSON.stringify, and you give the parameter as the JSON object. Okay. Once you give the JSON object, it will be converted into a text. Okay. Stringify method will convert it into a text which will be in the JSON format. So here you can pass the object, like example A, you can pass. For JSON.parse, you will give a text which is in the JSON format. It will convert it into a JavaScript object. And once you have a JavaScript object, if you want to convert it back to, again, a string format, you are going to use the JSON.stringify. And you will pass the JavaScript object as a parameter. Using JSON in PHP. So even in PHP, it is very easy to work with the JSON. Converting a JSON string into PHP object is quite straightforward. So how to do that? This is the start of the beginning of the PHP code. This is the end of the PHP code. Here we have a variable declare $text is equal to, inside the single quotes, we have the JSON information, whatever is the JSON format. For the artist, name, nationality, we have the information. And in case of a PHP, we have a method called JSON underscore decode. Using JSON underscore decode, we can convert a text which is having the JSON format information. It will convert it into an PHP object. So this method will convert this text into an PHP object, provided this is in the proper JSON format. If there is any parsing errors, the object PHP object will not be created. So this particular JSON should be in the proper format. When the parsing is done, it should pass the parsing. There should not be any error. Then a PHP object is created and reference is assigned to this particular variable, that is $and object. And how to access the values of the JSON echo $and object? Use the arrow key, access the artist, arrow key, nationality, which will fetch the value of the France. Now, in case of a PHP, either we can convert the string or the text which is in the JSON format into an PHP object, or we can convert it into an associative array. Okay, how to convert it into associative array? Convert JSON string into PHP associative array. $and array, this is the variable, is equal to JSON underscore decode. This is the method. Okay, same method. So here it converted a text into an PHP object. Here you are sending one more parameter. If the second parameter is true, then it will convert the JSON text into an associative array, not an PHP object. So you are going to send this text. This is the text in the JSON format, and comma true. So this will convert it into an associative array. Now how you will access this value, France value? Okay, $and array, this is the variable, and you will provide the two keys, artist and the nationality. These two keys, artist and the nationality, are mapped to the value France. Okay, echo it will output this to the browser. Notice that JSON underscore function can return either a PHP object or an associative array. Using JSON in PHP to go through the other direction. In the sense, other direction is from PHP object into an JSON text or the JSON string. We can use JSON underscore encode. So we use JSON underscore decode to convert an text into an PHP object. We can use JSON underscore encode to convert an object back into the string. This is beginning of the PHP code, end of the PHP code. We have the text. This is the JSON information. Then JSON decode, passing the text. This will convert it into an this text. This JSON text is converted into an PHP object, and it is assigned to an object. And I told you before, if there is any parsing error, the PHP object will not be created. Instead, there will be an error. Okay, and how to access that error? Using this method, JSON underscore last underscore error method. If you call this particular function, then if there is any error, it will return the error. Otherwise, it will return JSON underscore error underscore none. So if there is no parsing errors, then this value will be JSON underscore error underscore none. So both are equal. If both are equal, if this condition will be true only when there is no parsing error for the JSON. Once that is true, then we will access the values inside the JSON. Echo $and object, arrow operator, artist, arrow operator, nationality, which will fetch the value of France. And how to convert back to the text, JSON underscore encode method. Since JSON data is often coming from external source, always check for the parse error before using it via the JSON underscore last underscore error, because you are getting the information. Suppose if you are consuming some web services and it is giving the data as a JSON, first you have to make sure that once you get the JSON, you create the object and check the JSON underscore last dot error to make sure that whatever the response you got is a valid JSON. If it is a valid JSON, then only try to access the object. Convert PHP object into JSON string. How to do that? Dollar text is equal to JSON underscore encode and pass the PHP object. Okay. Next is the web services. Overview of the web services. Web services is the most common way of providing the services or the providing information. So many web applications, they develop the web services. Those web services can be consumed by their own subsystems, or it can be consumed by the external system. For example, you can have a web application where you can create a web service which will take the input as the longitude and latitude, and it provides the temperature at that particular location. So once you create a web services like that, you can open that web service to others. So anybody wants to consume that particular information, they can call that web service, they can pass the longitude and latitude information, and in return they will get a temperature as the response for that particular location. Web services are most common example of a computing paradigm commonly referred to as service-oriented computing or SOC. Service is piece of a software with a platform-independent interface that can be dynamically located and invoked. Web services are relatively standardized mechanism by which one software application can connect to and communicate with another software application using web protocols. So we can have different systems. Okay, maybe they are on different platforms, but we can have a communication between them using the web services. Okay, so using the web protocols, whatever the way that web service should be consumed, the other system can consume that particular web services in that way. So there is no problem with the communicating between the different kinds of applications or different who are on different platforms. What are the benefits of having a web service? The important benefit of that is the potentially provide interoperability, okay, between different software applications running on different platforms. So that is the first example I told you. If there are two systems which are on two different platforms, those can communicate with each other using the web services. And second advantage is benefit is they can be used to implement something called as a service-oriented architecture. So service-oriented architecture can be built using the web services. They can be offered by different systems within an organization as well as by different organizations. So these web services can be consumed within the organization, within its intranet, okay, within its other business units, or it can be used by the external systems. This is the visual overview. You can see here is a browser request for the server page. Then it goes to a web server request for web service. So it is coming here, partner web service, some kind of information. This will be provided as a web service. Then here is another, this is internal private web service. So this is a partner web service, and this one is a private web service. Web server request for the web service. So it is requesting this particular web server. And this is another request you can see, affiliate web service. This is like some kind of a travel service information or service. Then you can see asynchronous JavaScript request for the web services. It is directly going to this server. It goes as a public web service. Okay, this is a public web service. and this is a public web server. This is going from the JavaScript. Okay, so SOAP services. SOAP is the message protocol used to encode the service invocation and their return values via XML within the HTTP header. So SOAP is nothing but it's a message protocol which is used to encode the service invocation. So whenever you are making the calls, to encode that service invocations, SOAP is used, and return values are given as the XML inside the HTTP header. And SOAP and WSDL are very complex XML schemas akin to using compiler. Its output may be complicated to understand. The enthusiasm for SOAP-based web services had cooled. Earlier, SOAP-based web services were very popular with the invent of REST. Okay, the RESTful services are very common and very popular. So this is how the SOAP services are. This is the web service server, web service server. This is production web server. This is a development machine. Okay, and some of the activities that happen at the design time or the development time you can call, and some of the things happen at the production. At the design time, a web service is developed. Tool generally used to generate the SOAP processing code, thus less work for the developer. Normally, certain tools are used to generate the SOAP processing code. So here is the SOAP processing code. Then at the design time itself, a WSDL file is generated by the tool which describes the service. So this WSDL will describe the service, and at design time, tool reads WSDL file to discover the services operation. So it will read. This development machine is a WSDL enabled development tool. At the design time, tool generates. See, the tool itself will generate the code for consuming, how the service should be consumed. So tool will generate that particular code, and thus less work for the developer. Once you have the application, right? Once you have the application that consumes the SOAP services, so it is generated code. You have it can consume the SOAP services. When application is done, it is deployed in the design into production environment. So from the development environment, this application is deployed into a production environment. Now you can see browser, there is a request application that consumes the web service. So there is a certain request that is coming in which consumes the web service. So then the web service request will be sent to the web service server as a SOAP HTTP request, and once this request is received, that request is processed and a response is given as a SOAP HTTP response. So it's XML. So once we get the SOAP HTTP response is returned back, the tool generated code parses the SOAP based XML. So whatever the response you get, we already have a tool generated code which will process that, and therefore there is less work for the developer. This is how the architecture for the SOAP services. Then REST services. RESTs are very popular, and most of the web applications nowadays they use only RESTful because it has a lot of advantages. It doesn't require any separate protocol for encoding the message requests and the responses, and it directly it uses the HTTP, so it doesn't need any other protocol. REST stands for the representational state transfer. A RESTful web service does away with the service description layer and needs no separate protocol for encoding a message, request, or the responses. So we don't need any service description. Okay, we don't need any service description layer, or we don't need any separate protocol. Okay, so those are removed with the RESTful web services, and it uses the HTTP URLs for requesting a resource or the object. The serialized representation of this object, usually an XML or a JSON stream, is then returned to the request as a normal HTTP response. So, RESTful web services, they will return either XML or a JSON as part of the HTTP response. REST appears to have almost completely displaced the SOAP services. As I told you, now REST services are web services are most popular, and it has replaced the SOAP services. So this is the example. This is the example of the REST services. You can see at design time, we develop the web service. Okay, we develop the web service, and it will be residing in the web service server. Then from the browser, we get a request which consumes the web service. Then once we get the request, application packages the service request into query string parameters. So the request will be sent to the web server, web service server. It will go as a normal HTTP request. Application request web service operation. Then web service processes the request. Whatever is the request, it will process it and it will give the response. The response will come as either JSON or XML. In this particular case, it will come as a XML response. Once that web service returns that requested data, on the application side, we have to parse the XML. So we have to parse the XML, whatever the information is encoded there, whatever is required by the this particular request, that can be given to the browser. So here the developer has to do some kind of a work, okay, in order to parse that XML and process that particular XML. Example for the REST, Google geocoding API. So this is a good example for the RESTful service. The Google geocoding API provides a way to perform geocoding operations via an HTTP GET request, and this is especially useful example of the RESTful web service. Geocoding typically refers to the process of turning a real-world address into an geographic coordinates, which are usually latitude and the longitude. Geocoding, what it will do, it will convert the real-world address into the coordinates, the latitude and the longitude. And the reverse geocoding, it converts the geographic coordinates, that is latitude and longitude, into human readable address. This is another example. Okay, here is the how it can be used. So in this case, the request will take the following form. So this is how the RESTful web service request will be done. http://maps.googleapis.com/maps/api/geocode/xml, and then you give the address. This is how you will provide the address. So in order to access that particular geocode RESTful web service, you have to give the request like this. You can see here the same URL address is equal to, they have provided the address, complete address. So this will return the longitude and the latitude. This is the response. This is the HTTP header response, and this is the header information. And you can see the XML that is given as the response. There are some other information along with that. So we have the formatted address, then address components, different address components are there. Long name, short name. Okay, then we have this geometry inside the location. We have latitude and the longitude. The response is nothing but it is an XML. Identify and authenticating service requests. So one thing is you don't want to open your all the web services to the rest of the world because you want to restrict and whoever is coming into whoever is consuming the web server web services web application should be aware of those users. Means there should be some kind of a identification process and the authentication. Most web services are not open. Okay. Instead, they typically employ one of the following techniques. Identity. Each web service request must identify who is making the request. And authentication. Each web service request must provide additional evidence that they are who they say they are. So there should be some kind of a additional information, and most of the time it is done using the API key. And how to get the API key? Whoever is providing the web services, they will request the consumers of web services to register. Okay, register in their web application to whichever services they want to consume. They have to register for those services, and after doing the registration, they will get the API key, and that API key should be added to the GET request. That is how. And the before sending the response, or before accepting that request, the key will be checked whether it's a valid key or not. If it is a valid key, then the web service it will process and it will send the response. Web services that make use of an API key typically require the user, that is developer, to register online with the service for a API key. Okay, you have to register online so that you can get the API key. API key is then added to the GET request as a query string parameter. So here is the example. This is for the Microsoft Bing Maps web service. So this is the complete URL you have, and here is the address, and after the address you are sending the key. So this being a key is equal to Bing API key. This, whoever wants to consume that service, he has to register with Microsoft, get the register with Microsoft for that particular web service, get the API key, and with every request they have to include this key along with the get request. Some web services are providing private or proprietary information on or involving financial transactions. So some web services they provide very sensitive information. In that case, along with API key, there should be some other mechanism to make sure that the users are authorized users. In this case, the services not only require the API key, but they also require some type of username and password in order to perform an authorization. Many of the most well-known web services instead make use of an OAuth standard.